Hi, Faz. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Now, Nemaura Medical is working on the commercialization of SugarBEAT, an innovative and non-invasive continuous glucose monitoring solution for the global diabetes market. Tell us about the technology and what differentiates it from the competition.
Currently, there are two ways of measuring blood glucose levels. One is by finger pricking, taking a blood sample and applying it to a sensor, and then you measure it and you read a level intermittently as and when throughout the day. The other is where we have continuous meters. And notably, you have the Dexcom and you have the Abbott Libre. In both those instances, what you have is a sensor that is inserted inside the skin, so subcutaneous, and the device then sits on top of the arm for the duration of wear, which can be up to 14 days in the case of the Libre. In our case, what we have is a sensor that will sit on top of the skin and does not in any way become embedded inside the skin. And what that therefore means is that it's differentiated from the point of view that it is non-invasive, it is sitting on top of the skin, and therefore it is allowing individuals flexibility over how long they wear the device. So whether somebody chooses to wear it for, say, several hours in a day, or whether they choose to wear it once a week, for example, they can suddenly now do that. Whereas with the existing devices, you cannot do that. Once you have a sensor on, it is on for that duration, whether that be 10 days or 14 days. So that's the key differentiator. There aren't any needles that are used to insert the sensor in the skin. The sensor purely sits on top of the skin.
Faz, what's the essential value proposition? Why should investors own your stock today?
Well, we are at what you can call an inflection point, in the sense that we've spent the last approximately 7 years developing this technology. So as everybody's aware, developing medical devices, it can take a very long time. In the case of Dexcom, it took them over a decade before they got their device on the market. So we've been developing this for a number of years, and we are now at a point where launch is imminent, if you like. So literally within the next few weeks, we should be launching product into some of the key markets in the world, for example, Europe to start with, and then other markets. So when you look at it from that perspective, investors are not going to be investing in what is, let's say, research and development anymore. This is now all about commercialization and how can we most effectively exploit the market. And of course, the market is vast.
Which leads to the next question, Faz. Just how big is that market opportunity for Nemaura?
So you have currently almost 450 million diabetics. When you then consider pre-diabetics, it numbers almost 3 times that number. So from that point of view, it's quite a daunting prospect, really, trying to address such a huge market. But you have a vast market potential there. But also, we have to look at it from the perspective that existing continuous glucose monitors, they have been unable to tap into the broader market. If you take Dexcom, they have been on the market for 7 to 8 years now, and they predominantly cater for the type 1 market. They have around 350,000 patients that use the device in a market where you have over 450 million diabetics, of which about 45 million are type 1, for example. And then you take the Abbott Libre device, which was launched more recently, and they have now been able to set a precedent whereby they've demonstrated that CGM can be very usefully applied by both type 1s and type 2s. So you have a large number of type 2 patients that are also now using that device. So what you have is a situation where, despite the markets that they both address, i.e. the type 1s and type 2s, the uptake is still quite small, relatively speaking. In the case of the Libre, I think it's in the region of around 1.5 million users worldwide currently. So when we consider that there's a market of 450 million approximately, and yet you only have less than 2 million people using continuous glucose monitors, you have to ask yourself the question, well, why is that? And therefore, what is the real market opportunity? Why aren't more and more people using this? And of course, this is where our SugarBEAT device has a significant advantage, in that because you can use it on a daily intermittent basis, i.e. several hours a day, whether it be 10 hours, 14 hours, 24 hours, and you're not lumbered with the device for several days continuously, it means that therefore your daily cost is actually significantly less, i.e. in the sense that if you now apply a device once a week, you pay for 4 devices a month, for example. But coupled with that, the fact that it is non-invasive. So what we expect is to be able to address both the type 1 market, because bearing in mind, less than 30% of type 1s currently use CGMs. So we have 70% of type 1s that could also benefit from glucose trending. and understanding how daily lifestyle factors are affecting their glucose levels, as opposed to just finger prick testing. And that's a very large number, 70% plus of type 1 diabetics. In addition, you've got the type 2s, who, as I mentioned earlier, Abbott has set a precedent whereby they've demonstrated type 2s are also now using CGMs. So in our case, type 2s can also use it, but in addition, the vast number of pre-diabetics will also now be able to benefit from this, because as a pre-diabetic, for example, taking a finger prick or a couple of finger pricks in a day, every now and again, is really giving you a point-in-time measurement, and it doesn't really add a huge amount of value. Whereas if you're able to apply that device and get a daily profile over the course of, say, one day every 3 months or every 6 months, it gives you a far better insight into your glucose fluctuations, your tolerance to glucose and insulin, etc. And therefore, we feel that the market that we will be able to penetrate will be substantially higher than what the competitors have done so far.
Let's talk about upcoming product launches in the United States and Europe. Are you forecasting a product launch this year?
We expect to launch the product into Europe in the coming months. And the way we anticipate doing that is, first of all, by having a soft launch whereby we will have the product launch into various communities, and we will have individuals forming peer groups to be able to support each other in terms of the utility of the device and, importantly, what value they can derive from it. Because it's one thing having a device that gives you some data, but it's a completely different story when it comes to, well, what do you do with that data? Do you use it for therapeutic decisions? Do you use it to motivate yourself? Do you use it for lifestyle adjustment, for example? And so what we're planning to do is do an initial soft launch in the UK, followed by other major European territories such as France, Germany, Italy, Spain, etc. But also there are certain territories that will accept the CE mark approval as part of the registration process. So take Australia, for example, and some of the territories in the Middle East. And so very soon after launching into Europe and the UK, we will then be launching into those territories. With regards to the US, we are anticipating submitting to the FDA quite imminently, so possibly within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then thereafter, the review process, I guess, will probably be in the region of 6 to 9 months. And we therefore expect that sometime early next year to be able to launch into the US as well.
Faz, of course, management always plays a pivotal role in any company, and especially in smaller cap companies. Who are the key players at Nemaura?
Very recently, we hired Dr. Faz Chowdhurry, and he's got an impeccable track record in the diabetes space. More notably, recently, he spent a number of years with Dexcom, where he was in fact pivotal to obtaining reimbursement for the Dexcom devices in Germany. And he's got broader experience throughout Europe and as well as the US. And of course, as a physician by training, he is very familiar with the space. And so we consider him as being one of our key team members with respect to commercialization of the device. But also, as you will appreciate, any company of our size is always evolving. And one of the things we are doing at this point in time, and we have been doing continuously, is bringing on additional individuals to basically propel the company forward with regards to commercialization, because the R&D side has been very successfully completed. That's how we see it, as far as glucose monitoring goes, that is. And our next step is, of course, to commercialize for the glucose monitoring market. And so for that, we are now in the process of, as I say, hiring additional individuals around the world to commercialize that and to be able to ensure that the delivery of that product is as efficient and seamless as possible. In addition, of course, in the background, we will continue our endeavors with research with regards to the additional applications the technology has. And recently, we published some information on the website in relation to lactate monitoring. So we have already successfully proven concept with regards to lactate monitoring. So again, that is something that we'll be bringing forward as well in the near future.
Now, Faz, in summary, why should investors take an interest in Nemaura today?
We've developed a product which has the potential to disrupt the market for the simple reason that we have a product that can become ubiquitous in that virtually everybody could use it without any fear of, say, using needles or without the worry of the cost that is going to be involved, because they can now use the device on a single day, a week, or a month, or whenever they choose, and still obtain very, very powerful data, i.e., glucose profile based on their daily lifestyle activities. So no other company to date has been able to successfully launch a non-invasive system like this. So we would be the first. And of course, the market has grown significantly over the course of the last decade or so in particular. And also, very importantly, I would add, whilst there was, if you like, a general belief in the industry that continuous glucose monitoring was really reserved for type 1 diabetics, I think Abbott Libre has clearly demonstrated that that is not the case, and type 2s also would benefit from it. And also, of course, there's no doubt that pre-diabetics would also benefit from using this type of system. So from that perspective, when you take into account 450 million diabetics, 2-3 times that number of pre-diabetics, and a device that can now be used as and when a person chooses at a very low cost point, then you realize the potential that the technology and therefore the company has.
Makes sense, and it's a very powerful story. Thanks for joining us today, Faz.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.